Good afternoon, y'all. You're listening to Bedtime Reddit with Readtime Beddit. And tonight, we're reading one story from r/stories.
The Time I Stopped Being Racist. This is a story that happened when I was 13 years old. I lived in a primarily white neighborhood and there weren't really a lot of black people. I was going to school and spending my days just like I did when I was 13. But one day a boy called Joey came into our class. He was black. In fact, I think he was the only black person in our entire school. Already he was a sore thumb sticking out, but he really was just an ordinary kid just like me, having similar interests like sports and comic books and video games. But the 13-year-old me didn't understand that. In my mind, he looked repulsive somehow. I thought he was unnatural. I obviously didn't hate him, it was just that I, for some reason, felt disgusted by him at the time because he was black, and it wasn't just me, but a lot of my classmates gossiped about him too, seemingly sharing my opinion. Thinking we should play a prank on him, we started to harass him almost every day, like hiding his school bag or giving him funny names. We thought it was all fun and games, but in reality this was just plain bullying and nothing else. But Joey took it all. He was never really riled up every time something like this happened. Neither did he call for anyone. He was just silently endured until everyone stopped doing it as they got bored of it. I too stopped, but my repulsion never vanished. I simply started to avoid Joey, trying to think that he was not there. This was about time The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air started airing, and probably a year later our school since then had a lot more black people around, and a lot more controversies were reported because of this. But I never kept them in mind being so young. Honestly, I didn't like the show at first when it first aired, this being the same reason as why I didn't like Joey. I just felt repulsed by the black actors. But my mom really liked the show, and since we only had one TV, I was addicted to the TV, and I had no other choice but to watch it with my mom until I too started to actually like the show as well. I got over my repulsion of black actors, but not against the black people in real life, as I was more engaged into the comedy. This was when the show finally started to teach the viewers its lessons in subtle ways. I hadn't watched the show in a long while, so I don't remember the exact episode. But there was this one episode where Will talks with Carlton about their trip in the car, and Will starts to flip out that there are police stopping the both of them. Carlton is oblivious as to why Will is so upset, and starts saying that it all wouldn't have happened if they had a map, which makes Will even more upset as he realizes that Carlton doesn't understand what racial profiling or discrimination is, and he has never seemed to experience the same thing, as Will came from a rich upbringing in a nice neighborhood. The scene ends with Will sarcastically telling Carlton that it was all because of the map and not because of their skin color. The police stopped them before leaving to his room, while Carlton simply doesn't understand. The next scene is where Carlton's dad comes in and wishes his son a good night, and this is where Carlton asks his father about whether or not the police did the right thing and were they doing their job. His father replies, "I asked myself the first time I was stopped," and then says good night, before leaving Carlton by himself to contemplate. I don't know why the scene stuck with me so much, or why as a child it had much of an impact on me, but I thought about it for a week later and would stay up late at night thinking about it, while also thinking about all those other things I had done to Joey, and how he must have felt and why I did those things when he never did anything to me. I pondered on these thoughts for a month until I couldn't take it anymore and decided one day on our lunch break I'd talk to Joey. Our school had a lot more black people in it at the time, but Joey was still the only black person in our class. He was a loner too, and he never seemed to have attempted to talk to anyone. Neither did anyone else look to have approached him. I found him sitting in the cafeteria by himself, eating a radish sandwich. I knew that, since I too ate those since they were my favorite. I didn't know how to approach him or how to talk to him, as I felt incredibly awkward doing what I was about to do. I also made sure nobody knew what I was doing, which is why I tried to talk to him on our lunch break, since most of our classmates never went to the cafeteria to eat and brought their own lunch. Eventually, I got over my awkwardness and came over intending to talk to him by sitting next to him. He immediately noticed me when I sat near him, but didn't say anything other than glance at me before returning to his sandwich. I too didn't talk, and just like that, I think we had an entire lunch break passed with neither of us talking, and me just being awkward and sitting next to him saying nothing. I asked him later when we were much older what he thought when I did that, and he told me he thought I was about to harass him, and that what I was doing was actually the most nervous he was compared to everything else he had experienced since how he never had anyone sit like that next to him, and he was silent as a rock without knowing what I would do. Anyways, this continued on for like 4 days, where I would sit down at lunch breaks next to Joey without saying another word, as I didn't know what to say exactly. You know how kids are. Asking for forgiveness isn't something they can do easily with their stubborn minds. But finally, after a third day and thinking how unbearable this was, I finally just wanted to get this done with, and when the lunch break came around, I again sat next to him with my own lunch and immediately spoke before he could start eating. "I'm sorry." "What?" "I'm sorry." "For what?" "I'm sorry for doing all the things I did to you." "Ah, okay." He started eating, and I, not eating anything at all, still waited as I expected to hear something else, but I never did, as he simply ate while I looked at him waiting for the words I expected to hear. He too noticed me staring at him expectantly and stopped eating before turning to me. "What? So you forgive me?" No." And that's pretty much the end of the conversation. I was totally dumbfounded and had no idea what to say next. He didn't seem like he wanted to talk anymore and simply finished his lunch, while I did too. For the next week, I pretty much pondered about what to do next. He had refused my apology and I was clueless what to do. Because of that, I simply continued to have my lunch with Joey every day since I got used to it. We also started talking, not about the apology, but talking about hobbies like comics and video games. My repulsion towards him also disappeared as I started to understand him as a person more than something else, and before I knew it, we became pretty tight friends, going over to each other's houses and playing. My original friends also became more friendly with him once I started to invite and play with him more. This continued until our high school years and even until university, as both me and him attended the same university studying different fields, and me studying geology and him studying chemistry. We stayed friends for our entire life, and the reason I'm making this post is because I wanted to tell this story, as he married recently and asked me to become his best man, where I told him the same story at his wedding. We drank that night, and I asked him how being a married man was like, and he replied that he couldn't be happier. We got pretty drunk, and because of the story, there was something on the back of my mind that I forgot, and I wanted to ask. After all these years, did he ever forgive me? I asked him, both of us being absolutely wasted as we sat on the terrace. I didn't see his face, but he did tell me. No, not even after all these years, he said. He still hasn't forgiven me. He said that I was his best friend and that he would never forgive me, that he would hold this grudge until we both became rotten old men, and that I always had to stay with him so that I would one day forgive myself, instead of asking him something so irrelevant. And just like that, here we are. I'm writing this post in an effort to do exactly that, as I don't really want to keep this up until me and him become old men, not that I mind, but I'd rather leave something like this behind instead of keeping it with me. I hope others too can learn something from this story in a sense.